All right. Welcome back to the Inside the Ring podcast. In episode 28, we will cover the Charlie Lindgren extension in Washington, playoff talk with playoff positioning, Matt Rempe's hit on Nick Blankenberg, the Jets' franchise-setting win streak, Scheifele's goal-scoring record in Winnipeg, and a lot more trade deadline chatter as the trade deadline inches closer. But first, we welcome my co-host, Chris LaValle. Chris, how are you doing today?
I'm good, excited for this week ahead. It's gonna be chaotic and busy.
Oh my goodness, I know. I'm bracing myself for just constantly scrolling through my phone and seeing all the chaos that happens and not getting Frank Saravalli'd or Pierre LeBron on Twitter. So
You never
those
know. We could get something tonight.
those fake accounts, they'll get you, but the real accounts, they're working all hours of the day, it seems like, because well, we've seen a lot of midnight trade stuff and we've seen some 5 a.m. stuff. And yes, I'm looking forward to all the chaos and maybe some sleepless nights because trades trickle out 12 o'clock at night and don't break until 3 in the morning, similar
Yep.
to Luka Doncic to the Lakers. That maybe not of that magnitude, but
Who knows? It's trade
who
season.
knows? With that salary cap going up, Chris, you never know. But first, I want to hear a word from our sponsor, DraftKings Sportsbook.
DraftKings Sportsbook is Boston's hometown sportsbook. It's live right here in Massachusetts. Bet local on all your favorite sports from the comfort of your own home with DraftKings. To celebrate, all new customers will receive up to $250 in bonus bets when you sign up for DraftKings Sportsbook using code ITR. You can now bet local on moneyline spreads, props, and more with one of America's top-rated sportsbooks. That's DraftKings Sportsbook. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. Sign up with the code ITR to get up to $250 in bonus bets to use now that mobile sports betting is live in Massachusetts. That's code ITR, and it's only at DraftKings Sportsbook.
If your loved one is experiencing problems with gambling, call 800-327-5050 or visit helplinema.org to speak with a trained specialist free and confidentially 24/7. Must be 21 plus. Physically present in Mass. Eligibility restrictions apply. Subject to regulatory licensing requirements. Eligibility and deposit restrictions apply. Opt-in required. Bonus issued as free bets. Terms at DraftKings.com/MA.
There is some news trickling down the pipe today, and that was Charlie Lindgren getting an extension in Washington today. The Capitals' backup goaltender. He gets his 3-year contract. It's a short-term deal, $3 million a year. It's a great deal just looking at it from the outside. But one thing to note is the Capitals lock up their goaltending duo in Charlie Lindgren and Logan Thompson for under $10 million, which is great to see. Just from their perspective, it's great cap management, but
It's a
also
steal. It's an absolute
oh
steal.
yeah, absolutely. Don't get me wrong, 900 goaltender, and then you got Thompson's numbers, and you look around the league for other backups. The comparables are there, but 3 million for 3 years, and given the sample size he's put up before, when he's playing that 920, 915, is if he gets back to even that level, Lindgren, it's going to be an absolute incredible steal. And then with the way the salary cap's going up, like the Capitals, they're obviously looking to build on the 24-25 season and the success they're having as one of the President's Trophy favorites. So, like,
Well, it's no secret. I mean, realistically, think about it. They did purchase cap friendly, and now all of a sudden they got all these moves they've made that have seamlessly worked out for them. I mean, like you said, they're on their way to the converse or in the conversation for the President's Trophy, and they're building something. Obviously Ovechkin's getting up there, but they have the pieces to even a couple of years from now when he does retire, they're going to get better and better. We've named prospects from the World Juniors that are on that team coming, and so the future is bright for that team. And they've got two goalies now locked up for a little bit that have had good seasons and hopefully continue to build on that going forward past this year.
yeah, and looking at the division they're playing in the Metro is there's other teams that have been through longer rebuilds and have kind of struggled to get to where they want to be. And at this rate, you see just how Washington's retooled not only to support Ovechkin's goal scoring record, but the hunt for the goal scoring record, I should say, is you can see how they've retooled very quick. They've taken flyers on guys who maybe have been franchises have maybe just passed up on them, or they felt like they had to get out of a certain contract of some sort. And they built a really strong team because of it. And yeah, it's obviously a build upon the 25-26 and beyond that. So, but looking at other plays in the league, Matt Rempe's back in the headlines, but this time he will not receive supplemental discipline on a hit on Nick Blankenberg. And I want to note that it was a clean chicken wing right into the skull of Blankenberg. He did get checked out for a bit, but I know he did take a couple more shifts. I don't know if he didn't play the rest of the game. But the one thing I want to note is Andreas Englund, who played in LA formerly, immediately sticks up for his teammate and fights Rempe. Englund, I don't know if he's that much of a fighter, but I looked at his stats and I'm like, oh, 2 PIMs all season across like 24 games along that rough stat line, and obviously isn't the biggest fighter, and then holds his own against Matt Rempe, who is running like he was running wild throughout the entire NHL for quite a while, Chris.
That's for England. That's how you earn your stripes with a new team. Claimed off waivers from the Kings, and I forget how many games he's been with the Preds now, but I feel like that was almost a month ago. But right away, earning his stripes with the new team, sticking up for his guy. I really am not surprised there was no penalty there. No suspension there for him. Knowing his history, you might think there might be something, but I thought it was a clean hit. Obviously, the arm coming out a little bit, but I thought it was clean.
Well, getting to that is on the penalties on the play. Rempe got 2 minutes for elbowing and a 5-minute major for fighting, while Englund got 2 for instigating, 5 for fighting, and then a 10-minute misconduct for instigating the fight. Chris, do you think the referees made the right call with the penalties given out?
The misconduct is a little much for me. I would have been fine with the instigating and the 5-minute major for fighting. After that, leave it alone. That's just too much. He stuck up for his guy. He played. It was a hockey move. We see it time and time again where a player gets hit and somebody steps in, and you see a 2-minute instigating penalty and a 5-minute major. That's it. Leave it alone.
And now another thing to consider: Blankenberg is 5'9", while Rempe is 6'7". Do you think the height of the players had something to do with the call?
If it does, that's to me kind of bad. Like I said, leave it. I said, leave it alone. Let them do their thing. You shouldn't dictate a penalty call based on the size of a player.
And just the last thought for me is Blankenberg seemed like he was fine after the hit. He didn't take it too hard. And you had the fight between Englund and Rempe. I think it should have just ended there. 2 minutes each, 5 minutes each for fighting.
Yep.
And then just call it with that. And
let the game play. Leave it at that.
Exactly. And kind of looking along at the rest of the league and teams that are dealing with, do they sell? Do they compete? Or what do we do here? And that's the Ottawa Senators. Their health might be a concern for their playoff hopes. And what I found very interesting as I'm sifting through a lot of content and seeing stuff written is Alex Adams of Sportsnet noted that the Senators' health could be a concern while they are still in the wildcard hunt because they just got back Brady Tkachuk, Josh Norris, and Shane Pinto to snap a 5-game losing streak in a 5-3 win over the San Jose Sharks. Before that, didn't have the 3 guys. They had all marked down for a tough stretch in the season already. So could this be an impact could it be an impact thing of the players mentioned that it's kind of affecting the chemistry as a whole of the team?
I'd say yes. And my thing when I was looking at their lineup, as we talked about this as a topic for tonight, the deadline is huge for them. They need secondary scoring. it's the top six, and like you said, those three names they go out. Or I'm sorry, I said four, I believe, with Allmark. Those four go out, they're in big trouble. I mean, we saw it. They started falling out of the playoff spot. Now it's Columbus and Detroit in that spot. They are still right there, but their whole season hangs in the balance of four players, five, maybe six with the blue line help. They need something, and they got to make a move.
Another quick thing to note is, you were kind of alluding to it, is does this cause the Senators to go out and add insurance if they feel like they will secure a wild card spot or maybe more after the trade deadline is done?
They got to do something. I mean, they need secondary scoring. That's just a given. They need to find some secondary scoring. And even I go on the line of saying they need to find somebody that can be a borderline top six player. Because like you said, if any of those three forwards go out, they got to find somebody that can fill in that spot that's a top six scorer.
And it's becoming a thing. I know I've noticed this across a few teams, is if there's a certain player that gets hurt, it can shake the core of the chemistry of the entire team. And the Senators are right now the better example of that after getting three players back in one, especially their captain too. So, like you said, secondary scoring is a must for them. But another must is maybe finding that guy who can play in the middle or the top nine, the middle six. Somebody who can jump up if needed, if called upon, or God forbid an injury, but excels in that third, fourth line role, just driving play and contributing in that spot. And speaking of teams that are really good at finding that at the trade deadline, it's the Tampa Bay Lightning, and what a month they had in February, Chris. They haven't lost the game since January, a month where they struggled significantly. At the end of the month, they started absolute heater, go through the whole month of February where they outscore opponents 34-13. And Andrei Vasilevsky's numbers are Vezina caliber, without a doubt.
Yeah, their last loss was in regulation. Last regulation loss was at the end of January. They started the month out with a 3-2 loss to the Islanders in overtime, but 7-0-1, and they put up, like you said, they put 4.13 goals per game, allowing 1.88. Vasilevsky's on another level, as usual.
Yeah.
And I mean, what are they? They're down 1-0 to Florida right now, and they currently sit 3 points back of the Panthers for second, 4 points back of the Leafs for first. And you put another 2 weeks, put 2 weeks up like they just did, and they could be back at the top of that division again.
Which is scary to think about, and maybe it encourages them to go and, you know what, maybe we got to swing big again. And
they definitely will.
Yeah, it's Tampa. Every single year, it feels like they have to make one big move. And we saw it with Jeannot, Hagel. Jeannot, unfortunately, didn't work out, but Hagel's been one heck of an addition for them. And it seems like every year that there's a thought of maybe they'll slip into the wild card talk. And no, they're still too strong of a team. And they have one of the best goaltenders, which is another huge factor for them. And
I thought the wild card was this year. I really did. When they were falling out of it, I thought this was the wild card year.
Yeah, but reacquiring Ryan McDonagh has done them wonders, because when they went on that back-to-back Stanley Cup championship run, he was blocking shots like a madman for Vasilevsky. It was very hard to get goals or score goals in Vasilevsky up close because, McDonagh's throwing his body on the line, so you got to get it to the point and get shots on net, and hopefully you tip it in or rebounds created and you get that. That was Vasilevsky's weakness. They take McDonagh out of the equation, not saying the wheels fell off of the bus, but their defense got a little thin, and now you have so many open spots to go, and it's a little bit more exposed, and Vasilevsky's a little more exposed. Now that you add McDonagh back into the mix, and they look like the team that they were when they were on those Stanley Cup runs, if I'm being honest with you.
Yep, and as of right now, they're down 2-0 to Florida. Florida just scored again.
Okay. Well, speaking of Tampa, is they weren't in the playoff picture. They were teetering for that second wild card spot when this huge win streak started. And now they have a 6-point lead over Columbus and an 8-point lead over the Detroit Red Wings with a game in hand over both. And the Eastern Conference wild card race is nuts. But Columbus is in first, or Columbus has the first wild card, and Detroit has the second. Boston, New York, and Ottawa aren't too far behind. It's still a tight race, and it's kind of hard to call who's going to be in it, who might not, and who might slip. I think Boston's the team that's going to slip out of it as time passes, because maybe they wave the white flag now and they sell anyways, or maybe they're the team that sells anyways and still makes the playoffs. We've seen that before. So
Right now, I mean, so Boston's 1-4-2 in their last 7, and that's going into the worst time to have that stretch, because we are what 6 days, 5 days away from the deadline.
it's
You go into
Friday.
that stretch, so now they're going to look into moving, most likely, or selling. I did remember, I think it was Don Sweeney did come out and say that they're going to be doing moves that didn't sell on their roster, but also it didn't seem like buying at the same time. Like they were just going to retool a little bit. So like a name that gets floated out there a lot right now is Brad Marchand, and I don't see that as possibly a move that you make where you're retooling. If you're going to trade your captain, you're rebuilding. So it's interesting to see what happens with him. Going off the other teams we mentioned, the Red Wings, tough 2 games. I mean, realistically, to me, looking at last year, they had a stretch against Ottawa and around. It was earlier in the year. I think it was like the end of January, beginning of February. They had a back-to-back. They lost both, and they looked kind of sloppy. And against Columbus, the last 2 games, they looked kind of sloppy. I mean, even Todd McClellan called out Dylan Larkin for not showing up for the big games, and he said we need our big players for these games. So that worries me with that stretch from Columbus, but they got a tough one coming up tomorrow night. They got Carolina. That'll be interesting to see how they turn that around. They got to get points. I mean, I don't care if it's one. They got to do something to keep that lead or build on that lead. So 2 points would be key. They got Utah this weekend. I forget they have somebody else on Friday. I think it's Washington. So it's a tough stretch now. You needed at least 3 points against Columbus, if not 2. And now you're facing the top teams in the Metro, and then before you face Utah. And then as for Columbus, 4 straight. I mean, they're 5.25 goals per game in that win streak, and they're only giving up 2.5 per game. They're dialed in.
With some of the reports that have come out for Columbus too, is like they might not move any of their pending UFAs, and if they do, it was reported that like the bigger outlets, and it's on Saturday headlines even, like if they get an offer, it's got to be it's got to move the needle for them. And I think that goes to show you where Columbus feels they are at as a team right now. So maybe they have a lot more confidence than, say, the Rangers heading into the deadline. And we'll talk about the Rangers and another move that they made over the past couple of days. But when you look at the deadline and you look at where teams are at now and where they could be at Friday, so much can change. But a team where things might not change a whole lot for them, that's the Winnipeg Jets. And they just came off an 11-game franchise record winning streak. And Mark Scheifele also broke the all-time record in Jets 2.0 / Thrashers history for most goals as a Winnipeg Jet, which was previously held by Ilya Kovalchuk at 328. Scheifele scores an overtime winner against San Jose for their 10th straight win. They would go and win one more. And then an interesting stat in all of this is the Jets started the win streak on January 27th, 7th, sorry. They started on the 7th of January against Nashville, and they ended on the 27th against Nashville. which I find incredibly interesting. Sorry, I got my
Ironic.
dates mixed up there. And I wonder, with all of this, you see great chemistry. How does this affect their trade deadline from a chemistry standpoint? Because they're firing on all cylinders at the moment. It seems like they're not going to slow down. Sure, the power play hasn't been as great as it has been. We at one point they were almost 65%. Now it's down to the 30s and all that. They're still first in the league, but who do you add that makes the impact you're looking for? And with David Pagnotta on the fourth period saying things like, "Oh, Cheval Dayoff will be looking for the right ad, which might be in depth acquisition for defense and forward." That shows you that they have the top six they have been looking for, with Connor, Scheifele, Velarde on that top line, then Ehlers, Nemestikov, Perfetti on the second, and maybe some rotation. Where do you tweak on the bottom six? Because Niederreiter, Lowry, Appleton's it's a driving third line, and it's a great shutdown line. And your fourth line, which is interchangeable sometimes, you got a lot of grinders on there who will still drive play and hit hard. You look at defense, great chemistry, Morrissey, DeMello, Stamberg, and Pion. That, from the perspective that I look at, is it's chemistry-wise, you don't want to break it up, but playoffs, well, God forbid one guy goes down, and now you have to plug that hole and change things up. And Logan Stanley, it's very clear he's not coming out because he's getting better with the stretch of games that he's playing. Colin Miller's been a great acquisition, but when you put in Hayden Fleury, who was a great free agent signing, there's a lot of interchangeable depth that they already have, and I don't see a move that they can realistically make without taking away from the chemistry. So with going into Friday's deadline is maybe they tweak something and hope it's better instead of we got to make the big splash like a Monahan Toffoli acquisition. And I think that's kind of overshadowed a lot by teams like, say, Carolina going out for a big swing and getting Mikko Rantanen and Taylor Hall, because that shakes the core of the team, a trade like that.
I think they're, when you've talked about this in the couple recent episodes, where they're worried that they break up that chemistry, that's going to cost them a first round exit again. And I think what they need to do is maybe look for two guys from a same team that have a chemistry that can come in and add that to what they already have established. And, they've been rumored to two guys from the Bruins, and Brandon Carlo and Trent Frederick. You could bring both those guys in, and they add, to what you're looking for on the defense and what you're looking for in a forward, and add that depth. And it's two guys that have played together. They have the chemistry. Now they add to the chemistry you have there. And so it's tying the two chemistries together. And I mean, realistically, Connor Hellebuck's on his way to a back-to-back Vezina. So
easily. And there was I think it was Sportsnet Stats that posted it, that he's got more wins than like most teams in the league at the moment, which is it's crazy to think about. And maybe you got to consider him for the Hart Trophy, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, he has to be, right? I mean, I don't know who else. Right now you could put, McKinnon up there, but Hellebuck's doing a hell of a job this season.
And I know with Hellebuck last season, when they got bounced in the Stanley Cup playoffs by the Colorado Avalanche in 5 games, which was the second consecutive playoffs that it happened to them, Hellebuck said that he put a lot on himself and that he just needs to take less of a workload. And he said, he put too much on himself. So maybe he's looking at his current workload and saying, this is sustainable, but what do I have to do to slow down getting ready for playoffs in late April? And I don't know if it's a consistency thing that the player is looking at, or is it a sustainability thing that the player is looking at? So
do you think, going off of last year and then the Four Nations this year, that's helped Hellebuck be ready for playoffs this year.
The loss by the Americans in the Four Nations, there's two Jets that were on the American roster, which is Kyle Connor, who was a scratch in the final game, and Hellebuck, who was starting for the Americans in the Four Nations when they lost. So I'm wondering if that's going to light a bit of a fire under their asses when it comes to playoffs. When you also add into the fact that they got bounced 2 straight years in 5 games. Shifley was left off of Canada's roster. Morrissey was sick for the final game. So does it give that extra kick that the Jets are looking for? And getting back to Frederick and Carlo, we've talked about this prior, and well, like the whole situation with Gustafson is it'll be easily forgotten come playoff time, because even if he's on the other side of the fence, when he comes over to the Winnipeg Jets, is he'll be wearing the jersey and defending his teammates as he would when he's a Bruin. So, like you said, it's easily forgotten. But Carlo's the one that intrigues me, because he adds size to your blue line, but who do you pair him with right now?
Yeah. I mean, they'll figure that out. I mean, they'll find the right match.
And I'm almost wondering is if you get a guy like Carlo who plays physical and hits, if you push Pionk down to the third pairing and maybe pair him with like Sandberg or Stanley, and maybe that works. Or if he goes to a team, say like Calgary, you got to look at that. Calgary still in the playoff hunt, and they're still looking like $1 million. Calgary could be the team that gets them and adds them, because you got Weegar, Anderson. Why not add Brandon Carlo?
It'd be a nice move, and they have the pieces to move. I mean, there's been talk of names that they could be looking to move. They have the draft capital. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're definitely a team to watch out for. I think I said it a couple weeks ago, if not last week, that I'm surprised they're still there. I thought, they might fall off a little bit, but they're still hanging around. And obviously, we know they gave up Markstrom. Was that before this year?
That was in the offseason.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's giving up your top goalie like that, and seeing what they've gotten from Wolf and Vladar has been solid. And, Vancouver has their issues, so why not take advantage and go make a move to get you blue line help? And maybe you do find a way to make a deal that you get Frederick as well.
And with Calgary and Boston maybe being trade partners, is Boston, they could use another center to kind of even out center depth. Calgary's got Kadri. Maybe they Kadri for Carlo, something along those lines. That obviously wouldn't be just a 1-for-1, but it would be more pieces going back and forth, and maybe it's more players going back and forth.
Could be, like we said. I mean, I think it was Sweeney who said it, where it would be more of a retooling instead of a rebuild. So you could see something where it's getting a piece back to that Bruins lineup that helps them at the same time.
And speaking of trade chatter, there was a very interesting photo posted by Scott Lawton the other day. We'll put it up on the screen now, which is kind of funny because this was in Winnipeg. Chris, maybe Lawton's a Jet at the deadline, or maybe this was just a tease and he's trolling the media, because Scott Lawton's been in the trade talks for the last 5 seasons?
I really thought that was going to be his way of letting nobody else take the credit. He breaks the trade. But obviously that didn't happen. He played. And so who knows what's going on now. I mean, maybe he's trolling all of us, and you guys think I'm getting traded? I'm not. Here's a joke. I don't know what's going to happen with him, but I saw that pop up, and I saw it retweeted by a lot of people. And I'm curious what's going to happen now.
Maybe I don't want to say for sure on anything, but Lawton that's quite the troll if it's a troll. And
Right.
maybe it's the tease, and he's saying like, I know I'm going somewhere. I want to be the first one to say like, hey, last dinner with my buddies in this city. Like, you never know. Is it could just be a simple thing that he just wanted to mess with some media people with, or it could have a completely different meaning that we can't see at the surface level at the moment. We have until Friday, so
that could be it. It could be his last road dinner with the team because they're home on Tuesday and Thursday.
okay.
That
And
could be exactly what it is.
yeah, and kind of moving on here, the Detroit Red Wings. Bob Duff reported that they're likely to target Braden Shen, Ryan O'Reilly, or Ryan Strome. Like, those are three names that interest me. And from a Red Wings perspective, which one, like, are you happy with any of the ads, or is there one you're rooting for the most?
I want O'Reilly, and I will make that clear until Friday. If Ryan O'Reilly is the possibility for the Red Wings, I want that because they've lost Kopp for the season, and O'Reilly has another year of control after this year. He would be that second line center that the Red Wings desperately need. He would fit the mold perfectly where you're allowed to slide down. Obviously, if Kopp was healthy, things would change. O'Reilly would be second line, but now you have Comfer on the third line. And nothing against Kopp, but since he signed with Detroit, he hasn't been the offensive guy that we've seen in flashes. Whereas O'Reilly, number one, he can do that for you, and he'd be playing on a line. My guess is with, I believe, DeBrincat and either Kane or Tarasenko, unless Tarasenko is moved, and then he adds in playoff experience, which not many players on this Red Wings roster have. And so now you bring in a guy who has playoff experience and can teach the young guys and get them that playoff experience and get all of that going. And then they've built something. And now we're looking next year could be a deep run. I mean, I'm not saying this year can't be, but I think we're talking more in the future. And it gets the other young kid that they do have in Grand Rapids, they can come up and see that too next year and gets the ball rolling a little bit faster. I'm also intrigued by the Shen idea because the Red Wings need blue line help. And we talked last week that the idea of teaming the Shens up together. So you get Braden Shen, and then you pivot right away to how we get Luke here. And that helps them in two areas because they could use a center like Braden Shen, and they can use the blue line help from Luke Shen. So that would be an intriguing move to me if that's the move they went. But number one for me is O'Reilly. Number two is Shen. Strome, I'm interested about, but I'd rather the other two way before Strome.
Yeah, and the Red Wings are like the position they're in. I feel like if they add, they can sort things out until the playoffs end. This is going to be another year where no team is out of it until game 82 finishes and the standings say who's in and who's out. That's the year I think we're going to have, Chris.
Yeah.
Or I think the league's going to have that sort of year because we saw it last year with Philadelphia pulling the goaltender at the end and eliminating another, like I think it was Detroit they eliminated.
Yep.
And it was just all chaos that ensued. And
Detroit tied it and won in overtime.
Yep.
And then the Flyers lost when they pulled the goalie and the Capitals won.
Yeah. And it was crazy. And
it was fantastic. The NHL would love that if it happened again this year.
Oh, yeah. I remember I was studying for final exams. My buddies and I think we had all of the games going on at once, and we're watching everything. And everything unfolds. One of my buddies is like diehard Red Wings fans, flung himself off of his chair. He was okay, thankfully. But we're all just like, holy crap. Like, what an ending to the season. And if anything, there's a lot of high moments in the season where, like, you look at this, you're like, that happened this year, but it feels so long because it's a marathon, and heading into Friday, it's going to feel like a marathon within a marathon, and here we have a few trades, or three trades that have happened over the weekend. Is the first I want to talk about, Chris, is Seth Jones to the Florida Panthers for a conditional first round pick in 2026 and goaltender Spencer Knight. And what a return they netted. There's salary retention on Jones for $2.5 million a season for the next 5 seasons. And wow, is Calgary or Chicago has 4 NHL goaltenders on the roster with Soderblom, Laurent Brossoit, Peter Mrazek, and now Spencer Knight. So Jones going to Florida, and they get a young goaltender back. That was the one that surprised me, was a goaltender being the return. But
I love this trade for both sides. Like I wrote, what was it, last week when the news came out about Florida being linked to Seth Jones, and I thought it was a great ad for them on the blue line. But what Florida gave up to get him, I love Chicago's return. I mean, I know, like you said, they have 4 goalies on their roster, but realistically, they get a number one in my eyes. They got a guy who is young, and they could have as their goalie for the next couple of years with Connor Bedard and the young pieces they have there. That Soderblom and Mrazek were sharing time in net this season. Now it's Knight's net. I mean, you saw the trade go through, and tonight here we are. Chicago's playing, and Spencer Knight's the starting goalie. This was a perfect trade for both teams in my eyes.
Yeah, Seth Jones gets to the competitive team, and Knight kind of gets a reset, but he already has his cup, so he can help Chicago get back to that and play a starting netminder role, because Bobrovsky, that's his crease right now until they decide, or even Bobrovsky decides, that it's time for him to be a backup. And I wonder if Spencer Knight he wanted the change of scenery, or maybe it was Chicago said we want a goaltender, or they want a goaltender, and that's what they wanted in the trade. So it interests me that Chicago retained in the trade for the next 5 seasons. And just, it was there's a lot of things to consider. And another thing that just kind of popped up is, Chris, I wonder if Florida wasn't confident in Spencer Knight at all.
It could be what played into it. And, obviously, it's Bobrovsky's net. So, with all the stuff he's gone through, and like you said, change of scenery worked out for him. And obviously, I mean, right now they're playing the Kings, and he stopped all 12 shots he's faced right from the get-go. And they're being outshot 12-2 by the Kings. So now they got a goalie. So far, from what it seems like in his debut, he's dialing into what the Blackhawks might need in between the net.
Yeah, and another trade that interests me was Gustav Nyquist. He goes to Minnesota for a 2nd-round pick, and he was half retained in the trade. And is this Nashville finally waving that white flag on their season? Because it's been abysmal. Let's say that. And
it hasn't been pretty. With all the moves they made this offseason, everybody had high expectations. I mean, I had them making the playoffs. I thought they were going to be a wild card team, maybe even the top 3 of the Central. But it hasn't gone according to plan. And Nyquist, I want to say, goes back to a place he's played before. I mean, he played there for 3 games a couple of years back before he joined Nashville. But, I mean, it's an interesting trade for Minnesota. And they're a team, obviously, that we're going to have to watch closely over the next couple of days, because we've talked about Kaprizov and what could be coming there, where obviously this isn't a player that's going to replace what Kaprizov does for them. And so what they do going forward will tell a lot about what they're expecting for the rest of the season.
Yeah, and Nyquist, the trade interests me because, like you were mentioning earlier, is the secondary scoring element that goes into a lot of things. Is he the temporary just plug of the gap, and then once Kaprizov is back, he goes into that secondary scoring role.
Yep, and that's
Like,
what I mean. That's a piece that they needed, but I mean, like I said, that's where I get to. If the Kaprizov injury is more serious, then they go and add somebody else, and you're going to see Nyquist be that secondary scoring option no matter what. And he may even translate to a fourth line guy potentially. He could. I mean, he could, but
yeah.
we'll see what they do. I mean, there's a lot of questions with that team over the next couple of days.
Yeah, and we're probably gonna see some more movement come out of Minnesota. And speaking of a team that's been pretty active throughout the season, that's a Colorado Avalanche acquiring Ryan Lindgren at half retention alongside Jimmy Vesey, where they also traded away, or Colorado traded away Yusuf Parsonen, Calvin DeHaan, a conditional 2025 second round pick, and a conditional 2025 fourth round pick. Both conditions on the picks are the better of the picks that Colorado owns. And Chris, from the Central Division perspective, I don't know if this betters Colorado right out of the gate.
I think it might. With VC, it gives them, like we just talked about with Nyquist, a bottom six scorer. I mean, obviously VC had the hype to be a top six guy, but obviously things haven't panned out that way. And so, I mean, in Colorado, he could be a guy that you have on the third line, and Lindgren gives them blue line help. And I was more shocked that the Rangers made this trade because of where they are in the standings, giving up what they gave up. It's intriguing to me what they have for an idea ahead of Friday. Like, is there a conversation for a bigger trade for the Rangers to get into that playoff spot to build that team? Or is this signaling, hey, we're doing the same thing like I said with the Bruins, where we're retooling and getting different players back?
Yeah, and like you said, the Rangers, the position they're in, they can still compete, but are they going to pack a punch in playoffs? Is the question. They traded their captain early on. You bring in JT Miller, and now you trade Ryan Lindgren, who he himself said when he signed his bridge deal that he was hoping to sign a long-term deal soon with the Rangers. So there's a lot of things to consider, and maybe it's the Rangers saying, we don't see you in our top four in the future, or something along those lines, where they wanted to get what they could for him, but also build their team, because the Rangers, it's been an up and down season for them. They've had quite the drama themselves, and leading into Friday, we're going to have a lot of drama. And Chris, there's going to be a lot more trades to talk about Monday, but Friday will be a very interesting day. There will be a live show going here on Inside the Rink and our platforms. So live reactions are going to happen and live analysis. So that's going to be quite interesting. Chris, I look forward to doing the live show and seeing all of the millions of articles that have to be written in such short manner. But until then, we will see you later. Thank you for listening.